This video will be the first video for the topic of simultaneous equations. And before we start looking at simultaneous equations, it's probably a good idea to discuss what the word simultaneous means. So I just looked it up on Google and it had a couple of definitions, but the one I like the most would probably be happening at the same time or done at the same time, or really the words at the same time. So in the mathematical context, when we talk about simultaneous equations, what we're doing is we're trying to find a solution to two. In years 9 and 10 we'll probably have just two equations. You can have more than two equations, but we're trying to find solutions that will satisfy two equations at the same time. So that's where the word simultaneous comes in. The solution to these equations satisfy both equations. Okay, so that we're simultaneously satisfying the equations. So what can you expect? Well, the first thing is you can expect to be able to, or you're going to need to be able to solve two equations. Okay, like I said before, you can solve 3 or more equations, but in year 9, what you can expect is that we will give you 2 equations. And what you can also expect is that you will need to be able to solve for x and solve for y. That just means you need to find x and you need to find y. That means the x and y that will satisfy both the equations, not one of them, but both of them. And in this topic, we will be solving just linear simultaneous equations. What does that mean? Well, we've just finished the topic of coordinate geometry, and you should know that linear refers to straight lines. So both these equations do represent straight lines. If I was to graph them on Desmos, each of these would be a straight line. So there is such a thing as non-linear simultaneous equations, so graphs that aren't straight lines that we can solve simultaneously, but we will look at that topic at a later date. So right now, 2 equations solving for x and y, and they will be linear equations. So how will I find the solution to these linear equations? Especially think about, how can I find the solution to these linear equations if I know that they both represent straight lines? How can I find an x and a y that will satisfy both those lines? I'm hoping some of you are already thinking, well, let's draw a picture of those lines, because that's exactly one method you can use. It is called the graphical method. Okay? And the graphical method basically gets you to graph both the straight lines, both the lines, I should say lines, graph the straight lines represented by both equations, and you're going to find where those lines intersect. And you're going to write your solution in the form x equals whatever it is, the value, and then y equals. Okay? When we ask you to solve simultaneously, we're not asking you to find a point. We're asking you to find the x and y that satisfy both equations simultaneously. And that's why you are not to write your solution as a point. What we want is we want you to state the x value and the y value that will satisfy the equation simultaneously. So this is just an introduction into what simultaneous equations mean and what you're going to be expected to do. And in the next video, we are actually going to look at this graphical method. Okay, how can we graph 2 straight lines and use those graphs to find the solution that satisfies both the equations, i.e. where they meet. So this point here will satisfy the red line, but it also simultaneously satisfies the blue line. So video 2 will take us into the graphical method. This is just a little intro.